Prologue: The reason why. They found his father in the garage on a Tuesday morning. Liam was 16. He came home from school, dropped his backpack by the door and called out that he was home. No answer. The house was quiet. Too quiet. He found him in the garage, sitting in the driver's seat of the old Ford, the engine running, the garage door closed. The note was on the passenger seat. Asterisk: I'm sorry. I thought I could fix it. Couldn't. Asterisk. His father had been an accountant. A good one. Honest. Meticulous. The kind of man who balanced his checkbook to the penny and paid every bill the day it arrived. He'd worked for a construction company, a small family-owned place. And he'd found something. Irregularities. Money going missing. Not a lot, not at first. But enough. He'd reported it. To the owner. To the partners. To anyone who would listen. And they'd fired him. Not just fired him. They'd ruined him. Said he was the one stealing. Forged documents. Planted evidence. Destroyed his reputation. He'd never worked again. Not in accounting. Not in anything. And then one Tuesday morning he'd climbed into his old Ford in the garage and he'd turned the key and he'd waited. That was the day Liam Carter decided. No more. No more good people getting destroyed for doing the right thing. No more thieves getting away with it because they had money and power and friends in high places. He would study finance. He would become the best. He would learn every trick, every loophole, every way that people stole and lied and covered their tracks. And then he would stop them. Every single one. That was why, 12 years later, when Richard Hale had called and offered him the job at Veridian, Liam had said yes. Not because of the salary. Not because of the title. Because he'd heard the rumors. Because he'd seen the numbers. Because he'd smelled the rot. And he was going to dig it out. No matter what it cost. The private dining room smelled of sandalwood and expensive bourbon. A round mahogany table dominated the center, its surface polished to a mirror sheen that reflected the warm glow of recessed lighting. Plates of delicately arranged food sat untouched, steam curling upward in thin, wispy trails. Marcus Webb, Mark as everyone called him, leaned back in his chair, his substantial belly pressing against the edge of the table. At 58, he had the look of a man who had spent 3 decades eating expense account lunches and never once turned down a drink. His red face was crinkled into what he probably thought was an avuncular smile, but to Liam Carter, it looked more like the expression of a man about to offer you a deal you couldn't refuse. Which, as it turned out, was exactly what was about to happen. "Liam," Mark said, pouring a generous measure of bourbon into a crystal glass and sliding it across the table. "This Pappy Van Winkle's been aging since before you were in college. Real stuff. Not the watered-down swill they serve at the company holiday party." Liam accepted the glass with a nod. He was 28, 3 days into his new job as finance director of Veridian Corporation, and he already knew more about the company's dirty secrets than most people would learn in a lifetime. 72 hours. That was how long it had taken him. 3 days. 3 sleepless nights. 3 days of coffee and energy bars and staring at a screen until his eyes burned and his head throbbed, and he thought he might actually go blind. He'd started like any good auditor with the obvious stuff. Expense reports. Vendor payments. Reimbursements. The low-hanging fruit. The first day he'd found the usual stuff. Fudged expense reports. Inflated invoices. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. Petty theft. The kind of thing that happened at every company no matter how good the controls were. Mark Webb's fingerprints were all over it. Not directly, he was too careful for that, but through his people. His favorites. The ones who got the biggest bonuses and the best performance reviews and never seemed to get in trouble for anything. Day 2 was when it had gotten interesting. He'd been going through the vendor list, cross-referencing addresses and tax IDs and incorporation dates, when he'd seen it. Apex Innovations. He'd almost skipped right past it. Another tech vendor. Boring. Routine. But something had made him go back. Maybe it was the name. Too generic. Too perfect. Like someone had picked it out of a How to Name Your Shell Company playbook. He'd pulled their contracts. And that was when the hair on the back of his neck had stood up. Every single one of them had the same pattern. Same approval chain. Same lack of documentation. Same everything. No statement of work. No deliverables. No acceptance criteria. Nothing. Just a contract. A dollar amount. And 2 signatures. Mark Webb. And Daniel Spencer. He'd traced the payments. $90 million. Over 3 years. All going to the same bank account. All withdrawn within 48 hours. All vanishing into the ether. Day 3 was when he'd connected the dots. He'd pulled Daniel Spencer's personnel file, his employment history, his family connections, and there it was. Asterisk spouse, Elizabeth Hale Spencer, sister of Richard Hale, CEO. Asterisk, the final piece of the puzzle, Richard Hale, the founder, the visionary, the man who'd built Viridian from nothing. He was in on it. All of it. Liam had sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, the numbers swimming in front of his eyes. $97 million. Almost $100 million. Stolen. From the employees. From the shareholders. From the customers. From everyone who'd ever believed in Viridian. And the man at the top, the man who gave the speeches about integrity and excellence and doing things the right way, he was the one taking the biggest cut. Liam had felt sick. And then he'd felt angry. White-hot burning anger. The kind of anger that doesn't shout, that doesn't rage, that just sits there, cold and hard and heavy in your chest and waits. And that was when he'd made the decision. He wasn't just going to report it. He was going to take them down. All of them. Every last one. And he was going to do it from the inside. Because that was the only way to make it stick. He'd waited. He'd planned. He'd made copies of everything, encrypted, hidden, stored in 3 different places where nobody would ever find them. And then Mark Webb had called. Asterisk, hey kid. Welcome to the team. Let me buy you dinner. Show you the ropes. Asterisk. Liam had smiled. Asterisk, sure, Mark. That sounds great. Asterisk. The trap was set. And the mouse was walking right into it. You know, Mark continued, settling back into his chair with a grunt. When Richard told me they were bringing in some hotshot MBA from the outside, I'll admit, I had my doubts. Thought you'd be another one of those Ivy League types who knows all the theory but couldn't find his way around a real ledger with both hands and a flashlight. He chuckled, a deep rumbling sound that came from somewhere in his chest. But you've got good eyes, Liam. I can tell. Sharp. You've already been digging, haven't you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Liam took a slow sip of bourbon. It was smooth, expensive, and it burned going down in a way that had nothing to do with alcohol. I've been getting up to speed, he said, keeping his voice neutral. Mark's smile widened, but his eyes, small piggy eyes set deep in a fleshy face, narrowed slightly. Assessing. Calculating. Getting up to speed, he repeated, nodding slowly. Sure you have. And I bet you found some irregularities. Things that don't quite add up. He leaned forward, and the smile on his face slipped just a fraction, revealing something harder underneath. Something predatory. Here's the thing about this business, Liam. You've been in finance long enough to know, there's the numbers on paper, and then there's the real world. Sometimes you've got to fudge a little here, smooth things out there. It's all for the good of the company. He reached down beside his chair and came up with a thick manila envelope. He set it on the table between them, his meaty hand resting on top like he was presenting a trophy. The paper crinkled softly. $50,000, Mark said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. In cash. Untraceable. Welcome gift, let's call it. From me to you. To help you settle in. Liam stared at the envelope. It was bulging, the flap barely sealing the contents inside. $50,000. It sounded like a lot of money. To most people it was. But Liam knew the truth. The hole in Viridian's books wasn't $50,000. It wasn't $500,000. It wasn't even $5 million. It was $97,420,000. And counting. This envelope wasn't a gift. It was an insult. A down payment on silence. Mark thought he could buy him off with pocket change. Slowly, deliberately, Liam reached out and picked up the envelope. It was heavier than he'd expected. Solid. Real. He hefted it in his hand for a moment, feeling the weight of the money, the weight of the choice he was about to make. Then he smiled. It was a genuine smile, warm and open, the kind of smile that put people at ease. The kind of smile that said we're on the same side. Mark, he said, his voice warm with gratitude. You really didn't have to do this. Mark's face broke into a relieved grin. The tension drained out of his shoulders. He leaned back, visibly relaxing. Hey, what are friends for? He said, slapping the table lightly. I knew you were a smart kid, Liam. You get it. This is how the world works. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. He refilled both their glasses, his movements loose and easy now. The danger had passed. The kid was bought. Now about those old accounts, Mark said, waving a hand like he was swatting a fly. You just tidy them up a bit. Make everything nice and neat. Nothing that can't be explained away as accounting errors from the old system. You know the drill. He raised his glass. Welcome to the team, Liam. Liam raised his own glass, the smile never leaving his face. Thank you, Mark. For everything. He drained the glass in one go. The bourbon burned its way down his throat, and for a moment he thought he might actually be sick. But he kept smiling. He set the glass down gently and stood up, tucking the manila envelope into his briefcase. I should probably head out, he said, checking his watch. Early day tomorrow. Mark stood too, clapping him on the shoulder hard enough to make him stagger. You got it, kid. Go get some rest. We've got big things ahead of us. Big things. He walked Liam to the door, still clapping him on the back, still talking like they were old pals. Liam nodded and smiled and said all the right things. And then he walked out. The night air hit him like a slap in the face. Cold, crisp Seattle rain was starting to fall, fine mist that settled on his skin and hair. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just breathing, letting the cool air clear the bourbon fumes from his head. The briefcase in his hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He looked up and down the street. Cars passed by, their headlights cutting through the rain-slicked darkness. A couple walked past under an umbrella, laughing about something. Normal people. Normal lives. Liam pulled out his phone with his free hand. His thumb hovered over the screen for a heartbeat. Then he dialed. Seattle Police Department, non-emergency line. How may I direct your call? I'd like to report a crime, Liam said, and his voice was so steady, so calm, that he barely recognized it as his own. Commercial bribery and embezzlement. I have evidence. And I have the money. He didn't go far. He just stood there under the awning of the restaurant, watching the rain fall and waiting. The briefcase sat at his feet, the manila envelope inside like a sleeping serpent. His heart was hammering in his chest. Not from fear, though there was fear, plenty of it, but from something else. Something sharper, brighter. Excitement. The hunter's thrill. When the trap closes and the prey steps inside. 15 minutes later, 2 unmarked cars pulled up to the curb. No sirens, no flashing lights. Just dark sedans with tinted windows that slid into place like predators. For plainclothes officers got out. The man in front was in his late 40s, with a weathered face and eyes that missed nothing. He looked Liam up and down, taking in the suit, the briefcase, the calm expression. You the one who called? Liam Carter, Liam said, holding out a hand. I'm the new finance director at Viridian Corporation. The man shook his hand. His grip was firm, calloused. Detective Frank Chandler, Major Crimes. You said you have evidence of commercial bribery. I do. Liam hefted the briefcase. $50,000 in cash. The man who gave it to me is still inside. Second floor, the Rosewood Room. And I have this. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. A recording started playing. Mark's voice, low and conspiratorial, talking about irregularities and tidying up accounts and $50,000 as a welcome gift. Detective Chandler listened for 10 seconds, then nodded. Good. That's clean. He gestured to one of the other officers. Martinez, take Mr. Carter's statement. The rest of you with me. Let's go say hello to our friend inside. They moved quickly, quietly, professionals who'd done this 100 times. Liam watched them go, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and dread. This was it. The first domino. An officer named Martinez led him to one of the unmarked cars and started taking his statement. Liam answered every question clearly, precisely, no drama, no embellishment. Just the facts. He was halfway through describing the scope of the embezzlement when the restaurant doors burst open. Marcus Webb came stumbling out, flanked by 2 officers, his face the color of ash. The bourbon flush was gone, replaced by a sickly pallor. His eyes were wild, darting everywhere, until they locked onto Liam. For a moment time seemed to slow down. Mark stared at him, and Liam could see the exact moment it clicked. The exact moment the realization hit. This wasn't a random audit, this wasn't bad luck. This kid he'd tried to buy off for 50 grand had set him up. The shock gave way to fury. His face turned purple. He strained against the officers holding him, spittle flying from his mouth. "Carter! You son of a bitch! You set me up! You!" The officers hauled him toward the car. But he kept twisting, kept staring, his eyes burning with a hatred so intense it was almost physical. Liam met his gaze calmly. And then he smiled. Not the warm, friendly smile from the restaurant. Something colder. Something final. He mouthed 2 words. "Goodbye." Mark screamed something incoherent, but the officers shoved him into the back seat and slammed the door. The car pulled away from the curb, tires hissing on the wet pavement. Liam stood there in the rain watching it go. Somewhere a siren wailed, faint and distant. The war had begun. And $50,000 was just the opening salvo. The next morning, Liam walked into the office like nothing had happened. The finance department was on the 14th floor. An open-plan sea of cubicles with glass-walled offices ringing the perimeter. When Liam stepped off the elevator, the entire floor went quiet. Not the quiet of people working. The quiet of animals sensing a predator. Every head turned. Every pair of eyes locked onto him. They knew. Of course they knew. Mark Webb had been at Viridian for 22 years. He'd hired half the people in this department, promoted the other half. He was their patron, their protector, their link to power. And now he was in jail. And the kid who'd put him there was walking through the door like he owned the place. Liam could feel the hostility rolling off them in waves. Fear, mostly fear of what he might find, fear of what might happen to them. But underneath the fear, resentment. Anger. Who does this kid think he is? He's been here 3 days and he takes down Mark Webb? What's he after? He walked past the cubicles without acknowledging any of them. His shoes clicking sharply on the polished concrete floor. The sound echoed in the silence. Melissa Hart was waiting for him outside his office. 34, sharp features, hair pulled back in a tight bun that matched her tight expression. She was Mark's protégé, his right hand for the past 8 years. Everyone said she was the smart one, the one who really ran the department while Mark schmoozed and drank. She was holding a coffee cup, and her hand was shaking so badly that the saucer rattled against it. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice thin and reedy. Your coffee." Liam took it from her. His fingers brushed hers and she flinched like she'd been burned. "Thank you, Melissa." His voice was normal, pleasant even, but the effect was electric. He could feel the entire floor hold its breath. He turned and surveyed the room. People immediately looked away, diving back into their computer screens with the desperate intensity of actors who'd forgotten their lines. Liam took a slow sip of coffee. It was terrible, bitter, overbrewed, the kind of coffee you got when the person making it was terrified of you. He set the cup down on the reception desk. "Everyone," he said, and his voice carried easily across the open floor. "Can I have your attention, please?" Heads popped up one by one. "Effective immediately, we're initiating a full audit of the past 3 years' financial records. All routine work is on hold. Every single one of you will be reassigned to audit support. I want every invoice, every receipt, every journal entry pulled and cross-referenced. Nothing leaves this floor until it's been reviewed twice." There was a beat of stunned silence. Then Melissa stepped forward. "Mr. Carter," she said, and her voice was stronger now, bolstered by the righteousness of a legitimate concern. That's an enormous undertaking. We're in the middle of quarterly close, and we have year-end reporting starting next month. If we drop everything for a full audit." "I said," Liam repeated, and his voice was still calm, still even, but there was an edge to it now, cold and sharp as a blade. "All routine work is on hold." He looked directly at her. "If anyone has a problem with that, they can put it in writing and submit it to HR. Along with their resignation." Silence. Absolute total silence. Melissa's mouth worked, but no sound came out. "Good," Liam said, turning toward his office. "Let's get to work." He closed the door behind him, and the sound was like a gunshot. Through the glass he could see them all standing there frozen, scared, angry, confused. Good. He knew they wouldn't help. He knew they'd drag their feet, lose documents, accidentally delete files. Mark's people through and through. But that was fine. He didn't need their help. He just needed their compliance. He needed them to know that the audit was happening, that it was real, and that there was nothing they could do to stop it. Because the real work, the digging, the following, the connecting of dots, that he'd already been doing on his own. And he'd already found the thread that would unravel everything. Apex Innovations. Liam sat down at his desk and pulled up the Apex Innovations file on his screen. The numbers stared back at him, neat and orderly and completely fictitious. He smiled. This was where it got interesting. Because Mark Webb couldn't have pulled this off alone. Not 97 million. Not with contracts that bypassed every procurement control, every approval process, every safeguard that was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of thing. Mark was a thief, yes. But he was a small-time thief playing in a big-time game. Somebody else was pulling the strings. Somebody higher up. Liam's intercom buzzed. Mr. Carter? It was Melissa, her voice tight. The CEO's office is on the line. Mr. Hale would like to see you. Now. Liam leaned back in his chair. Finally. He'd been wondering when the man at the top would want to talk. Tell him I'll be right up. He straightened his tie, checked his reflection in the computer screen and stood up. The real game, he knew, was just beginning. Mark Webb was a pawn. And Richard Hale was about to find out that his new finance director wasn't nearly as easy to control as the old one. The CEO's suite occupied the entire top floor of the Viridian Tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 sides, offering a panoramic view of Puget Sound and the Olympic Mountains beyond. On a clear day you could see forever. Today, though, rain streaked the glass, turning the view into a watercolor blur of gray and blue. Richard Hale was standing by the window when Liam walked in, looking out at the city he'd built. He was 51, silver-haired, with a kind of relaxed confidence that only came from having more money than most countries. He was wearing a custom suit that probably cost more than Liam made in a month, and he was holding a coffee cup like it was a scepter. He didn't turn around. Close the door. Liam closed the door. Richard turned slowly, and his eyes, sharp, intelligent, the eyes of a man who'd built an empire from nothing, raked over Liam from head to toe. Sit. Liam sat. Richard didn't sit. He walked over to the coffee table and dropped a newspaper on it. The Seattle Times business section, page 3. A small article buried in the back. Local tech company finance director arrested on embezzlement charges. No name, no company. But everyone who mattered would know. For days, Richard said. His voice quiet, conversational. Like they were talking about the weather. You've been here 4 days, Liam. 4 days, and you've already put a 22-year veteran of this company in jail. He picked up the paper and tapped the article with one finger. Mark Webb wasn't perfect. God knows. But he was loyal. He built this company with me back when we were working out of a garage in Redmond. He was there when we had nothing. He set the paper down and looked at Liam. You know what my father used to tell me? Before you go after the king, you'd better be prepared to take the throne. You're going after kings, Liam. And I'm not sure you know what throne you're aiming for. Liam met his gaze steadily. I'm not aiming for any throne, Mr. Hale. I'm doing my job. The job you hired me to do. Did I hire you to destroy my company from the inside out? Richard's voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it now. A warning. I hired you to clean up the finance department, to modernize it, to bring it into the 21st century. I didn't hire you to start a war. With all respect, sir, the war was already here. I just walked into the middle of it. Liam leaned forward slightly. Have you seen the numbers? The real numbers? Mark Webb didn't fudge a few expense reports. He's been running a systematic embezzlement operation for at least 3 years. The total is close to $100 million. Richard's expression didn't change. Not a flicker. 100 million, he repeated like he was tasting the words. That's a serious allegation. It's not an allegation. It's fact. I have the spreadsheets, the contracts, the bank records, everything. Silence. Richard studied him for a long moment. Then abruptly he smiled. It was a warm smile, a charming smile. The smile of a man who'd talked his way out of more tight spots than most people had hot dinners. "You know what, Liam?" he said, walking around to sit behind his desk. "You're right. I hired you because you're the best. The best don't play games. The best get results." He steepled his fingers. "So here's what we're going to do. I'm giving you full authority. Complete access. Whatever you need to get to the bottom of this. If there's rot in this company, I want it cut out. Clean. No exceptions." He leaned forward, his voice sincere, earnest. "I don't care who it is. I don't care how long they've been here. If they've stolen from this company, they go. You hear me? Anyone." Liam stared at him. It was a masterful performance. If he hadn't already done the math, if he hadn't already traced the money and connected the dots, he might have believed it. But he had. And he knew. Richard Hale wasn't giving him a blank check. He was handing him a knife. And he was pointing him toward the people he wanted eliminated. The question was, what happened when the knife turned back on him? "Thank you, sir," Liam said, standing up. "I won't let you down." Richard stood too, extending his hand across the desk. "I know you won't, Liam. That's why you're here." Liam shook his hand. It was firm, warm, completely trustworthy. The hand of a man who'd built a billion-dollar company on charm and ambition, and a willingness to do whatever it took. Liam walked out of the office with his head held high. But inside he was smiling a cold, private smile. Let's play, he thought. Let's see how far this rabbit hole goes. The full authority edict came down fast. By noon, the email had gone out to every department head. CC'd to the entire executive team. Asterisk effective immediately. Finance Director Liam Carter has been granted full audit authority by the Office of the CEO. All departments are to provide full cooperation and access to all records, personnel, and systems as requested. Failure to comply will be considered a serious disciplinary matter. Asterisk. The effect on the finance department was immediate and dramatic. The resistance vanished. Overnight, Liam went from the enemy to the anointed one. Files that had been misplaced suddenly turned up. Spreadsheets that were corrupted miraculously recovered. People who'd been too busy to help suddenly had all the time in the world. Melissa, in particular, underwent a transformation that would have impressed a chameleon. She showed up at Liam's office door at 9 o'clock sharp with a stack of organized files and a deferential smile. "Mr. Carter, I've pulled all the vendor contracts from Q3 2 years ago, sorted by department and approval chain. I remembered you were looking into the Apex Innovations accounts, so I put those on top." She set the stack down carefully, her eyes wide and attentive. "Is there anything else I can do? I can stay late tonight if you need help going through them. I want to make sure you have everything you need." Liam looked at her. She was scared. Terrified, actually. And she was trying to buy her way out of trouble with cooperation. It was transparent. Obvious. Almost pathetic. But it was also useful. "Thank you, Melissa," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "That's very helpful. Leave them here." She nodded, still smiling that tight, nervous smile, and backed out of the office. Liam waited until the door closed, then shook his head. They thought he was stupid. They thought he'd be so flattered by the CEO's favor, so dazzled by his new authority, that he'd miss what was right in front of him. He pulled the Apex Innovations files toward him and started going through them. The pattern was clear. Every single contract, dozens of them over 3 years, followed the same path. Initiated by the Technology and Procurement Division. Approved at the VP level. No competitive bidding. No technical evaluation. No due diligence of any kind. And every single one had been signed off by the same person. Daniel Spencer, VP of Technology and Procurement. Richard Hale's brother-in-law. Liam sat back in his chair, staring at the signature on the screen. There it was. The connection. Daniel was married to Richard's younger sister, Elizabeth. He'd been with the company almost as long as Mark. He ran the biggest, most expensive division in the company. And he was family. Of course he was. You don't steal $100 million from a company and trust a stranger to sign off on it. You trust family. Liam picked up the phone. "Melissa, can you come in here?" She appeared in the doorway 30 seconds later, breathless. "Yes, Mr. Carter. I need a list of every project manager who's worked with Apex Innovations in the past 3 years. Names, departments, tenure. Everything you've got. Melissa's face didn't change. Not visibly. But Liam saw it. The micro-expression. The flicker of panic in her eyes, gone almost as soon as it appeared. She knew. Of course, Mr. Carter. I'll get right on that. She turned and left, and Liam noticed that her steps were faster than usual. Almost a run. He smiled. Good. Let her run. Let her warn them. The more they panicked, the more mistakes they'd make. And the more mistakes they made, the easier it would be to catch them all. The first counterattack came 3 days later. Mark Webb made bail. Liam wasn't surprised. $50,000 for a white-collar defendant with no prior record and deep pockets? The judge practically handed it to him. What did surprise him was how quickly Mark moved. The post went up on Veridian's internal message board at 2:17 p.m. Anonymous, of course. The kind of post that thrived in the toxic hothouse of corporate gossip. Exclusive. The real story behind Mark Webb's arrest. The post was a masterpiece of innuendo. It painted Liam as a ruthless striver. A corporate climber who'd manufactured the whole thing to eliminate Mark and seize power for himself. It hinted darkly at outside influences and competitor ties. It called Mark a dedicated company man. A victim of office politics and a young man's ambition. And the comments. God, the comments. Asterisk, I knew there was something off about that kid. Too smooth. Asterisk. Asterisk, Mark built this place. This is how they repay him. Disgraceful. Asterisk. He's been here 5 minutes and he's already destroying the company from the inside. Asterisk, wake up, people. This is a hostile takeover in slow motion. Asterisk. By 3 o'clock, it was the most talked about post in the history of the Veridian intranet. Melissa came into Liam's office wearing an expression of poorly concealed glee. Mr. Carter, have you seen the... I've seen it. Liam didn't look up from his screen. He was reading the post for the 3rd time, analyzing the language, the cadence, the specific accusations. It was Mark's voice. No question. The phrasing, the petty grievances, the specific details about old company politics, this was Mark dictating to someone on the inside. Probably Melissa. Should we do something? Melissa asked, her voice carefully neutral, her eyes bright with suppressed excitement. I mean, it's very damaging. To your reputation, and to the department's. Do something. Liam looked up at her and he was smiling. Melissa blinked. She'd been expecting anger. Defensiveness. Panic. Not a smile. Yeah, Liam said, leaning back in his chair. We should definitely do something. He tapped his keyboard a few times. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to post a reply. Under my name. Melissa's mouth fell open slightly. Post a reply? Sir, I don't think that's a good idea. Engaging with anonymous trolls usually just post it, Melissa. His voice was still pleasant, still smiling, but there was no warmth in it. Word for word. Exactly what I tell you. He looked directly at her. Ready? She nodded, mouth dry. Write this. I have screenshots of this thread and have forwarded them to the police department's cybercrimes unit. Defamation and witness intimidation are serious crimes. Additionally, I've uncovered new evidence regarding the Apex Innovations contracts totaling $97.42 million. I'll be sharing my findings with both the authorities and the board of directors tomorrow morning. Got all that? Melissa was staring at him, her face as white as a sheet. Mr. Carter, I don't think you should. Post it, Melissa. His voice didn't rise. It didn't harden. It just settled, like a stone dropping to the bottom of a lake. Now. She left the office without another word. Liam watched her go, then turned back to his screen. The reply went up 3 minutes later. And the message board exploded. Not with more attacks. With silence. The anonymous accounts vanished. The comments stopped. The thread was deleted by a moderator 10 minutes later, like it had never existed. But everyone had seen it. Everyone knew. Liam smiled. Check. Richard Hale summoned him to the top floor the next morning. This time there was no pretense of warmth. No charming smile, no firm handshake. Richard was standing behind his desk, his face like thunder. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" It wasn't a roar. It was quieter than that. And scarier. Liam stood his ground. "I'm doing my job, sir." "Your job?" Richard laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "Your job is not to blow up the company on the internet. Your job is not to air our dirty laundry for every employee and their mother to read." He slammed a fist on the desk. "Apex Innovations? You had to name them? In a public forum. It's an internal forum, sir. Don't split hairs with me, Carter." Richard's eyes were cold. "You know exactly what you did. You dropped a bomb and walked away. And now every person in this company is wondering if their job is safe, if the company is going under, is there a problem with me investigating Apex Innovations?" The question hung in the air. Richard's jaw tightened. "Apex Innovations is a legitimate vendor," he said, but his voice was too loud, too defensive. "They provide critical services to our technology division." "Do they?" Liam asked quietly. "Because from where I'm sitting, they look like a shell company with a P.O. box and a bank account. $97 million for what? No deliverables. No product. No employees that I can find." He took a step forward. "And every single contract was signed off by Daniel Spencer. Your brother-in-law." The silence that followed was absolute. Richard's face had gone from red to white. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "You're out of line, Carter." "Am I?" Liam held his gaze. "You told me to find the rot. You told me no exceptions. Was that a lie?" For a long moment, Liam thought Richard was going to throw him out of the office, fire him on the spot. But he didn't. He took a deep breath. And then another. And slowly, the anger drained out of him, replaced by something colder, more calculating. "Daniel is family," he said, and his voice was tired now. "Weary. My wife's baby brother. He's not perfect. He's made mistakes. But he's not a criminal. The numbers say otherwise, sir. The numbers can say whatever you want them to say." Richard snapped. Then he caught himself, took another breath. "Look, Liam, let's be adults about this. Mark Webb is a thief. He stole from this company. He's going to prison. That's done. That's justice." He walked around from behind the desk and stood in front of Liam. His voice was lower now, reasonable, persuasive. "But we don't need to drag the whole company through the mud to get there. We don't need to air every piece of dirty laundry in public. Mark is the fall guy. He takes the hit, we recover the money, the company moves on. Everybody wins." "Everybody except the shareholders," Liam said. "Everybody except the employees who work here and think their company is honest. Everybody except the people who invested their retirement savings in Viridian stock." Richard's smile was thin. "Don't be naive, Liam. This is business. In business, you don't burn the village to save it." "No," Liam said. "But you don't let the termites keep eating the foundation either." He turned toward the door. "I'm going to keep investigating, Mr. Hale. If you want to stop me, you'll have to fire me." He walked out without looking back. Behind him, he heard Richard Hale pick up his phone. "Get me HR," he said, and his voice was ice. "And legal. Now." It happened fast. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, 2 people from HR and 1 from legal were standing in Liam's office, holding manila envelopes with very official-looking letterhead. The woman from HR, Jennifer, her name tag said, had the apologetic but implacable expression of someone who'd done this many times before. "Mr. Carter, I'm here to inform you that, effective immediately, you are being placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation." She handed him the first envelope. "This is the formal notice. You've been accused of multiple violations of company policy, including unauthorized disclosure of confidential information, misuse of company systems, and creating a hostile work environment." The lawyer stepped forward. He was young, too young for this, and he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Additionally," he said, his voice rehearsed, "the company is initiating an internal review of your conduct and your handling of the Webb investigation. During this period, you are to surrender all company property, laptop, phone, access badges, keys, and you are not to contact any Viridian employee or enter any Viridian facility." He handed Liam the second envelope. "This is the formal investigation letter. It outlines the allegations and the process. Liam looked from one to the other. Then he smiled. It was the same smile he'd given Mark Webb in the restaurant. Warm, friendly, completely unreadable. Sure, he said. No problem. He pulled his laptop bag onto the desk, took out his work laptop and set it on the table. He pulled out his phone, his badge, his keys. Everything. The HR woman blinked. She'd been expecting a fight. Screaming. Threats of lawsuits. Not cooperation. Is that everything? Liam asked. Why yes, she said, slightly off balance. That should be. That's everything. Great. Liam slung his personal bag over his shoulder. Well, have fun with your investigation. I'll be in touch. He walked out of the office. The entire finance department was watching. He could feel their eyes on him as he walked through the cubicle farm. Some looked triumphant. Some looked guilty. Some looked scared. He kept walking. Head high. Smile on his face. He didn't look back. The elevator doors closed, and the smile faded. He leaned against the wall of the elevator and closed his eyes. It was a bold move. He had to give Richard that. Fire him before he could go public with the Daniel Spencer connection. Discredit him. Make it look like he was the bad guy. Classic. Predictable. And ultimately useless. Because Liam had been expecting this. He'd been ready for it since the day he walked into the restaurant with Mark Webb. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors slid open. Liam stepped out into the rain and pulled out his personal phone. He had a call to make. And then the real game began. The call from Mark Webb came that evening. Liam was sitting in his apartment going through the backup files he'd made. Every spreadsheet, every email, every piece of evidence, all encrypted and stored on 3 separate drives. None of them connected to the internet. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Well. Mark's voice oozed smug satisfaction. If it isn't the great Liam Carter. Corporate hero. Boy wonder. How's that unemployment line treating you? Liam leaned back in his chair. Mark, you sound cheerful. Bail must have been easier than you expected. Easy? Son, I could have made bail with the loose change in my couch. You think 50 grand is a lot of money to people like me? Mark laughed, a deep throaty sound. You know what's funny? You thought you were so smart. You thought you could waltz in here and take down the whole system. But you know what you did? You pissed off the wrong people. And now you're out on your ass, and nobody's going to believe a word you say. His voice dropped, cold and gloating. Richard's going to ruin you, kid. He's going to sue you for everything you've got. He's going to make sure you never work in this town again. You'll be lucky to get a job flipping burgers. Liam listened in silence. When Mark was done, he said one thing. Daniel Spencer paid your bail, didn't he? Silence. Dead silence on the other end of the line. Then? What? Your bail. $50,000. It came from Daniel. Or, more accurately, it came from the same place all your money comes from. Apex Innovations. Mark's breathing was loud in Liam's ear. How? How do you? I also know that Apex Innovations is registered to your wife's cousin. A man named Jeffrey who lives in Tacoma, and has never held a job in tech in his life. I know that over the past 3 years, you and Daniel and a handful of other people have siphoned $97,420,000 out of Veridian through fake contracts and shell companies. He paused. And I know Richard Hale knows about all of it. Mark didn't say anything. But Liam could hear him. The ragged breathing. The panic. You're crazy, Mark said finally, but his voice was weaker now. Shaky. You don't know anything. You're just making shit up because you're angry you got fired. Am I? Liam said softly. Then why did Daniel pay your bail? Why did Richard try to shut down my investigation? Why is everyone so scared of a guy who just got fired? He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked streets of Capitol Hill. Here's the thing, Mark. You think this is over. You think because I got kicked out of the company I lose. But you're wrong. His voice was very quiet. Because I wasn't just building a case for the company. I was building a case for the police. For the FBI. For the SEC. Every single piece of evidence I found, I sent copies to all of them. Before you even made bail. Silence. Then Mark made a sound. Half gasp, half whimper. You're bluffing. Am I? Liam smiled into the phone. Then why don't you ask Daniel why his bank accounts were frozen this morning? Why don't you ask Richard why they called him in for a meeting? He paused, letting the words sink in. You kicked me off the board, Mark. That's fine. I don't need to be inside the company to take you all down. In fact, he looked out at the city lights blurred by rain. I've got more room to maneuver out here. He hung up. Mark didn't call back. Liam set the phone down and took a deep breath. The board was bigger now, and the stakes were higher, but that was okay. He'd always played better when the odds were against him. The next morning, Liam walked into the law offices of Bennett and Associates. It was a small firm in a converted warehouse in Pioneer Square. Exposed brick, steel beams, the kind of place that looked more like a tech startup than a law office. Victoria Bennett met him in the lobby. She was 40 with short dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She was wearing a tailored blazer over jeans and boots, and she moved with the kind of easy confidence that came from winning a lot of cases. They'd gone to business school together. Not close friends, but they'd known each other. She'd been the best student in their corporate law class, and everyone had expected her to end up at a big firm on a partner track. Instead, she'd started her own practice, specializing in white-collar defense and whistleblower cases. She was the best, and she was expensive, but Liam didn't care about the money. He cared about winning. Thanks for seeing me on such short notice, he said, following her into her office. Are you kidding? I've been following the Viridian story in the news. When Liam Carter calls and says he has a case, you drop everything. She gestured to a chair. Sit. Tell me everything. Liam sat, and he told her. Everything. The audit. The $50,000. The restaurant. The recording. Apex Innovations. The shell companies. Daniel Spencer. Richard Hale. The internal message board. The firing. All of it. When he was done, Victoria leaned back in her chair and let out a long, slow whistle. Jesus Christ, Liam. You didn't find a few skeletons. You found a graveyard. She picked up the stack of evidence he brought with him and started flipping through it. Spreadsheets. Bank records. Contract copies. The audio recording transcript. Her expression grew more and more serious as she went. This is good, she said finally. This is really good. The recording of Webb is a home run. The Apex Innovations paper trail is solid. And the timeline Richard Hale trying to shut you down right after you start digging into his brother-in-law? That's obstruction of justice, plain and simple. She set the files down. But here's the problem. Getting Webb and Spencer is easy. They're low-hanging fruit. Stupid, greedy, careless. But Hale? He's smarter. He's had years to cover his tracks. If he's involved, and I'm not saying he is, he's made sure there's no paper trail leading to him. Liam nodded. I know. That's why I need you. Victoria smiled. It was a sharp, hungry smile, the smile of a lawyer who'd just been handed the case of a lifetime. Here's what we do, she said, leaning forward. First, we file a wrongful termination suit. Immediately. The fact that he fired you right after you started investigating his brother-in-law? That's retaliation. Open and shut. We'll get your job back and we'll get damages. She held up a finger. Second, we go on offense. You've already given everything to the police? Good. We add to it. We file a formal whistleblower complaint with the SEC. They love cases like this: big public company, high-level fraud inside whistleblower. They'll throw resources at it. And if it leads to a successful enforcement action, you get a percentage of the recovery. Could be millions. Millions. Whistleblower awards are 10 to 30% of what the government recovers. If we're talking about $100 million in fraud. She shrugged. Do the math. Liam sat back thinking. He hadn't done this for the money. He'd done it because it was the right thing to do. Because someone had to. But millions. That changed things. Third, Victoria continued, we prepare for the counterattack. Hale is going to come after you hard. He'll file defamation claims. He'll leak things to the press. He'll try to ruin your reputation. We need to be ready for all of it. She looked at him directly. Are you ready for this, Liam? Because this isn't going to be easy. These people have money, power, connections. They will fight dirty. They will try to destroy you. Liam thought about Mark Webb's face when the cops led him out of the restaurant. He thought about Richard Hale's cold, angry eyes. He thought about the $97 million that had been stolen from the people who worked.